All right. You are listening to 91.5 WUML Lowell Blues Deluxe, and it's my honor and pleasure to have Jon Geiger in with me today. Hello, John.
Hey, I'm so glad to be here with you, man.
And I am so glad to have you. It's going to be fun asking you some questions. Like I said, your bio doesn't have much in it, so that gives me carte blanche to ask you whatever I want.
You've got carte blanche.
So let's talk about your beginnings first.
Mhm.
Where'd you grow up,
I grew
and how'd you get into this business?
I grew up uptown in New York City, and it was the New York City of the '70s and the '80s, where it was more like Dog Day Afternoon and Serpico and French Connection than a picture postcard of the Empire State Building. And so it was pretty gritty scene, uh, and that kind of intensity was kind of what everybody's birthright was. You know, it was a neighborhood kind of place, and and it was an era before helicopter parenting, where that mom would put the key under the mat, say this is for emergencies only, and send you out with your marching orders at 9 in the morning, say dinner is at 7, don't come home and don't get arrested.
There you
and
go.
and so and I was a kid who, like many, you don't really know where you fit in. You're not at the cool kids table. You're not necessarily a jock. And then somehow you hear something, and it says, I have a tribe out there that I didn't realize I'm connected to. And for me, that was hearing Live at the Regal by B.B. King and the Layla album, and Cream. And all of a sudden, it blew my mind. I heard BB on Live at the Regal. I was so musically uneducated that I didn't even really understand what he was playing, because his conviction was so strong. I thought it was a trumpet, because it felt like the way he played, you had to want those notes, like somebody have to blow into a horn to get them. And I flipped that tape. It was a cassette tape. And 7 times, one day, the Layla album, the intro to Have You Ever Loved a Woman, just like it just all, it did something to me that nothing in my life had ever done. And it sent me into a room just trying to get at this music. And that was the start of the journey. And one of the things I was always thankful for was, with that kind of adolescent energy, I would dig into whatever information was out there, which really was come by either by word of mouth or, guitar magazines. There were only a couple. That was basically the way you would know anything about where to go next, because there was no internet, there was none of this kind of stuff. And one of the things I was so thankful for was I would read interviews with some of the people who greatly influenced me, Clapton or BB or whatnot, in Guitar Player magazine, and they would speak about, oh, well, you got to check out Freddie King, or you've got to check out Charlie Christian, or whoever it was, and that would send you off to the used record bin.
Yep.
Trying to find that, and that's when sort of the whole digging started. And what happened was, over time, when this became an overwhelming understanding that this was something that that was more than just a hobby, kind of an interest, the next big step for me was hearing a Miles Davis live album called We Want Miles that had Mike Stern playing guitar on it. At the time, nobody really knew that much about him, because, again, he hadn't done his solo stuff yet, and yet I found this interview with him, and one thing led to another. What I heard in his playing was the intensity of Hendrix and BB and whatnot, but mixed with a vocabulary that also had this harmonic sophistication and this incredible technical side that wasn't just about technique. It was all in service of an emotion. And that's really, really important to me, that it wasn't just chops. It wasn't about impressing people. It was about moving people. And if you move them, then you impress them in turn. And I started seeking out how to understand the ability to express oneself with freedom to a greater and greater extent on the instrument. And I ended up getting taken on as a student by some of these heroes of mine. I ended up studying with Mike, with Hiram Bullock, with a woman named Emily Remler, a great jazz artist, John Schofield. These were all some of my teachers and became mentors. They would sort of pass me from one to the other when they would go out on tour, and I would study with them in New York. I was 17 at the time or whatnot, and they basically said, what you need is to try to get into a music school so you're not sleeping on couches.
I'm gonna ask you a question about music schools.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
I know you went to Berkeley, but now I'm going to ask you why you didn't go to Juilliard, because that's right in New York. Good question, isn't it?
It's a great question. So here's the answer, and it's actually an interesting lesson in the answer that I was taught. So your teachers become, like, in a way, like your parents. They become the authority figures that you turn to for validation. I had unbelievable insecurity and self-consciousness because the only other people I knew who really played guitar were Mike Stern and John Schofield, Hiram Bullock, and Emily. It's like I had no idea if I had any talent. To me, talent was the ability to work hard and go after something. It was all hard work, and so they told me to try get into a music school so I could have less pressure working on stuff as far as survival goes, because I could eat in the cafeteria and go home and practice. And so I sent out a tape to try to get into music school, and the ones I applied to were the ones they went to. Emily, Mike, and John went to Berkeley. Hiram went to the University of Miami, which at the time had a great jazz program. And what they all said to me was, look, there's two ways to really understand music and applying harmony and these things on your instrument. That's learn classical or jazz. And then you'll have the freedom, whatever music you feel compelled to play, to have more freedom, be more liberated in expression on your instrument. But you got to learn more to choose how to play without it being limited by patterns and these kind of things. So I sent out the same tape to these schools and one more, which was in New York, which was they were just starting up a program at a place called the New School. And the New School, which is also, I think, where they have the Actors Studio and some other stuff connected with them, but they were starting up a New School jazz program. And I knew that I needed to get pretty much a full scholarship to be able to even go to any school. I couldn't afford any place. And what happened was the same tape got 3 different responses from 3 different schools. It was the same stuff I was playing, and that was a really interesting thing, because the first letter I got back was from the University of Miami, and my whole way of playing was coming from the standpoint of that kind of B.B. King and Jim Hall approach of I wasn't interested in playing a lot of notes. I was interested in digging in deep with the ones I was feeling, and so there was a lot of it wasn't emphasis. It wasn't a technical fusion kind of audition tape. It was different. And as a result, Miami said they didn't hear the technique on the recording to even give me admission. So I was devastated because I thought, well, there you have it. I thought I wasn't good enough, and there's the proof. And I was devastated. And
never give up. Never give up.
And and then the next response I got was from the new school, which is the one I really wanted to go to because the guy who auditioned me was a darling of a man named Arnie Lawrence, and he was so cool, and it was a great experience. But because it was the first year of the program, they didn't have any scholarship money to give because they only had 32 slots. So I was given admission to their first class, but I couldn't go because they didn't have money to give. And the last response I got was from Berklee College of Music, where I was blessed and fortunate enough to, they heard something in my playing that the others didn't, maybe, and they awarded me, the John Schofield scholarship and some other stuff that together made it like gave me a scholarship to go to music school. And the funny thing was they didn't know I studied with John at the time. And John got a letter from them saying, this year's recipient of your scholarship. He's like, calls me up. He says, I just got a picture of the guy who actually got my scholarship this year. It looks vaguely familiar. So I was so thankful that Berklee, but the lesson here in all of this was how much it totally devastated my self-esteem to have the first response saying you weren't even good enough to get in to one school. And here is another school saying, not only do we hear something in your playing, but we're going to give you a scholarship for what we hear. And it was a really good thing to remember over the years is that, it's in the eyes of the beholder, right? It's like maybe if you have your self-esteem hung up on every single person, what they hear in you, you get in where you fit in. And so I went to Berklee, but Juilliard was not the New York program I was thinking of. It was the new school because they had a little bit more of a jazz kind of program that seemed a little bit more catered to where I was coming from.
And that's what they were telling you should go shoot for, is the jazz side of it.
Yeah, it was because I was coming from like where Cream married what I heard with Miles, and that openness, the improvisation aspect was central to me, even when playing rhythm parts and things like that. And so the jazz adventurousness mixed with the emotion was much more powerful to me than a classical curriculum,
That's great. So tell me about Berklee. What was Berklee like?
Well, Berklee was amazing. It was another kind of confidence check because every classmate of mine was brilliant, and I was in awe of my classmates. I was inspired by them, and the amazing thing was it felt like each of us could hear what each other one of us had that they did special. It's an interesting kind of human thing where we naturally seem to discount whatever comes to us naturally. We feel like I kind of naturally can do this, so it must not be that hard or that special. What I really want, you see it in acting, right? Somebody's a great comedic actor and they want to do a drama, or a dramatic actor and they're like, well, but what I really got to do is comedy. It's like, what you got to do is own what it is that is authentically you, and realize that the fact that there is something that's authentically you is what's special. So what was so powerful to me about Berklee was hearing each person, like this guy's an amazing funk drummer and he's going to end up being this, and this person amazing, you know, and lo and behold, everyone kind of became what we each saw in each other at that kind of learning stage. So to me, one of the greatest things about Berklee was the playing opportunities and my classmates, you know.
What did they say you were going to become? How's that for a question?
I don't know if I was privy to those conversations. I think I was always sort of a blues guy at Berklee. You know, it's like there were different majors you could have, performance and composition, arranging and whatnot. And there was one that was really cool because it was kind of open-ended called professional music. And it integrated all these, but really this guy named Fred Schmidt, who was the head of that department or division, he was very savvy about helping people to find that thing that is theirs. And part of that line of completion involved at near the end owning what you were going to be doing out in the world, what your goal was, and to create a press kit for that and a recording and all of this. And he really kind of sat me down. He said, don't diminish what it is. Very easy if playing something that is seen by people who can play really complicated stuff. Blues-based stuff is sort of seen as folded into anything else, sometimes in a negative way, like, oh, well, yeah, that's just blues, you know, but here's the real stuff, you know, and there's a difference. If you dig really deep into blues-based stuff, it can incorporate, look at Derek Trucks, it can incorporate Indian influences. So I think that I was seen as a guy who played with a lot of feeling, or tried to, was connected with a certain amount of intensity and passion, even if I wasn't as technically proficient as I was working towards becoming. And so I think that was probably the impression of me, you know, that I tried to play with a lot of feeling, and I was coming from that, and maybe that was the thing that people heard in me or responded to. If I can, I'll tell you a quick story to that end. One of my dearest teachers, who became like a big brother to me, was this guy named Hiram Bullock, one of the greatest. If people don't know Hiram Bullock, look him up, check him out, listen to everything, watch the YouTube play. He's a monstrous player in every style. But he was also incredibly astute. People saw his stage persona, and it was had a lot of fun and a lot of energy, but they didn't realize what a deep guy he was and how intelligent and astute he was. And in private, that came out. And he was one who really, really heard and steered in that manner, because he had been steered that way. And he shared with me a private story about his process of becoming who he became. And he talked about his time having Pat Metheny as a teacher of his. And at that time, he was trying to fit in, Hiram was. And so he came to Miami with a big box jazz guitar and thought that's what he needed to do. And his rock thing was like small potatoes. And he said he came to Pat's room for the first lesson, and he was going to get checked out for auditioning for different ensembles that were being offered. And they're graded by number. You know, the highest ensemble was number 1, and so forth. And Pat, he said, put a piece of music in front of him. And he said, I don't know, I can't read that. And he put some chord charts, and he says, I don't know how to play those. And so finally, they just played a blues. And as he told me, he said, I was playing chords, and Pat was playing all his amazing stuff. And And then Pat turned to rhythm, and Hiram said, and I started soloing, just doing what I knew, like Hendrix-based stuff. And Pat immediately stopped and said, Guitar Ensemble 1. And Hiram said, I don't understand. Like, you put music in front of me, I couldn't read it. You put chords in front of me, I didn't know how to play them. And yet you say Guitar Ensemble 1. And Pat said to him, one of the deepest things anybody could ever say to a student, which is, all you lack is knowledge. Which is a really heavy thing to say. And he was basically saying, you're a musician, you just, the thing that you're missing can be acquired, And so when Hiram and I would do our lessons, he did something like that to me, where we'd be playing and he'd play all his amazing stuff and he'd play rhythm. And then I'd play the only things I knew and could connect with, which are coming out of BB and Clapton and whatnot. And I'll never forget, he just stopped what he was doing and he turned to me and he just folded his arms and he kind of nodded his head and he looked at me and he said, Blind Lemon Geiger. And I thought, Blind Lemon Geiger. And he goes, you're like an old black man, a little white boy body. And it was just, but what was so cool was he was making a joke, but he was also saying, this is who you really are. You authentically feel this stuff. And years later, I had the opportunity to play the bitter end. And it was a really big deal for me because it was this place in Greenwich Village that I knew the history of, and it was a big honor. And Hiram came to my gig. This is after Berkeley, and I've been playing in Texas for a while. And I was so excited to have him hear me now, all these years later. And he came up to me at the end of the set, and he walked up to the stage, and I thought we'd have this big embrace and this big, hey, like, what do you think? And he just walked up to the side of the stage, and he folded his arms, and he looked at me and said, Blind Lemon Geiger. And it was like, you became everything I heard in you then. And it was the greatest moment for me in many ways, because it was a reaffirmation of there is something that is you, and I'm proud of you for digging into it and not diminishing it, but like owning it and trying to refine it. And so to me, Berkeley was a process of falling into the bear traps of other influences and things that are, like with anything, you get pulled into other directions trying to find your own value. And then sometimes it's a long road to get all the way back to home. And you end up back where you actually initially had that nugget, but maybe now you can play it with a little more proficiency.
So when you were done with school,
yeah,
when did you start becoming a professional musician? When did that happen?
Well, one of my best friends at Berkeley was an incredible piano player and musician named Bucka Allen. His dad, Terry Allen's a great songwriter, very, very rooted in Texas. And he was very connected to the Austin scene. And this is the early 90s, before Austin was like so widely known as such a hip place. It was known in Texas, but maybe not in Boston at the time. And he just said to me, you're a live we used to play all the time in ensemble rooms and whatnot. And he said, you're a live player. They're going to love you there. You'll fit in. And I just took this gamble and I just moved to Austin. And I had, while I was at Berkeley, I used to right away to Antone's, which was this legendary blues club in Austin, and get their illustrated history of Antone's and all of that. Like I was sort of like a kid with baseball cards. I'd look at all the pictures and memorize who was who and kind of try to know everybody in the scene. And then I got down there, and all of a sudden I'm surrounded by these people who I knew as legends. And one of the greatest honors in my life was being embraced by that music community. And that's when I started, like, I got heard by Susan Antone, who at the time was running the club. And I was playing there as the guitarist with some other with some other group. And she took me in the back room afterwards and she said, I want you to form your own group and have your first gig under your own name as a band leader be here at Antone's, which was like amazing. And that's the moment where I started leading my own group. And from that point on, I was playing for 10 years all around Texas, booking myself. And at one point I was up to, doing 18 shows a month. And
Wow. That's
playing
a lot.
all around the state, especially if you don't have a booking agent, you're doing it all yourself, then it's sort of like purely based on, I'd like to feel like what the club owners are hearing when you're doing it. And so that was my graduate school, was because none of these shows were like 5-band nights, play for half. It was like 3 sets. It's like a proper 4 hours, 9 to 1, 10 to 2 kind of thing. And you really, your live playing chops become, you're shooting for the standard of the guys who used to play, the Chitlin circuit. It's like all those guys who we hear as legendary torch carriers of this live improvisationally based music, like they all learned by doing it and by like trying to lift people up every single song, every single night, every single set. And that's the standard that I would shoot for, and they all shot for. And that's the way to actually, that's the only way to get it from the head to the hands, and the heart.
Are there any recordings when you were in Texas, the 10 years in Texas, of any live recordings or studio recordings?
Oh, sure. I've got them all in the closet.
But you haven't released any of it.
I did. And then at one point I was, they had a Local Licks Live, KLBJ, which was a great rock station there, still is. I did a live performance that on the radio, and then I had a number of other self-released shows, and then I did a studio EP that was produced by an amazing musician named Michael Ramos, and I was so fortunate to have Charlie Sexton was so kind and supportive to me, and his band at the time were these still are these amazing musicians. Raphael Gayal, who's a great drummer, went on to he was Leonard Cohen's drummer, and on, and a brilliant bass player named George Reef, and Michael's great keyboardist. And we did an EP, and it ended up KGSR, which was the AAA stadium in the area. Jody Denberg, great DJ. They had like a competition for best independent release, and I ended up one year winning that. And although I don't look at music as a competition, but the value of that was that it got me on a big bill, as a result of that. And so there were some recordings, but to have the opportunity to really record properly is a process. Usually, it takes at some point having some kind of management or booking support where you get put in a position where there's a label that is having you record, or a manager who's helping you fund it, or these days with digital, it's possible to do it cheaper. But in those days, there was no digital recording, really. It was like 2-inch tape, recording time, and it was pretty pricey. So I was just trying to catch as catch can from live shows and board tapes and whatnot that I'd release. But that one was a proper studio recording, and I have that. But right now I'm, I've kind of just have one thing out at the moment to keep the focus on that.
Which is the live album.
Live at
Harvelle's,
Harvelle's.
yep.
Live at Harvelle's just got released. Yeah.
Let me ask you this question. I was reading
Sure.
in your bio. You had two accidents that changed the course of your life.
Yeah.
You want to
Yeah.
talk about how that all changed everything?
Well, had a car accident, and they said I wouldn't be able to walk again, and that happened while in Texas. And I kind of rehabbed myself back and was, and 5 years later, I ran my first marathon, and that was sort of a real journey of the spirit to try to believe that, well, you can imagine. So that nothing is, as they say in Lawrence of Arabia. Omar Sharif turns to Peter O'Toole at one point and says, "Nothing is written." Or maybe Lawrence turns to Omar Sharif and says, "Nothing is written." You know, it's like that. You know, yeah, it's a test of expanding your imagination and buying into it, and then just knowing that, like, how important something is to you, and then to continue on that. Although this is going to make it sound like I'm a terrible driver, but these things actually just were accident. Then years later, about, I don't know, 6 years ago, maybe, here in California, I had a really terrible accident that actually I ended up losing all feeling to 3 of the fingers in my left hand, and some other, injuries, and it really sent me on. It sent me on a real inner quest. I wasn't playing much at the time. I had gotten very disheartened, truthfully, about trying to make my way and not having found that representation that would allow an easier time of getting beyond the local opportunities. And so I was doing more day work, and getting older and feeling like, well, maybe that was it. Maybe it's passed me by.
Let me tell you why I asked those questions about the accidents, because what I saw in reading that pushed you forward each time to move to get past it all and continue to do what you're doing. You haven't stopped.
I appreciate that.
A lot of people would have given up and not continued, but you just keep going, which is, to me, speaks volumes.
Well, I thank you. What happened after the second one was I really had sort of a dark night of the soul kind of time where I was I couldn't see how I would be able to keep going. And in the pursuit, especially now with all that time spent trying to get my fingers to do what I wanted them to, and now not being able to feel them on the fretboard and so forth. And I sort of developed a different way of playing where I could feel where my fingers were in relation. And what it caused me to do was to basically say, what am I, because I really should not have survived the accident. And I found myself asking myself the question, well, what am I here for? Like, do I want to have my life have been about the day jobs I'm working? Or, like, what is it? What am I willing to put this all on the line for? And it always came back to music and to trying to live up to that standard. And what happened was.
Do you see what you just said? Exactly what I said.
Mm.
That you just kept going, and the thing that came back after all that stuff that happened, and you could have stopped. You looked at yourself and said, "What is it I'm doing? What am I supposed to be doing?" And you come
Mm.
right back to the music, and you found a way. You found a way to make it work.
Well, yeah. I mean,
And for me, that says volumes for you of who you are and what you're actually trying to accomplish.
well, I really appreciate you seeing, hearing, and feeling that. It's it's my truth is that I've never been about being famous or being on the cover of a magazine or making X amount of, like, all I want to do
The
is to
bottom
live
line
up to the
is
standard.
the bottom line is you're a musician and you want to continue to be a musician,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of things that have happened over time, over the years, good and bad, and you still come back to, I want to play, I want to continue to play, I love to play, I love the music. You can hear it. That's you.
Thank you. It's
And that's what I wanted to bring out in asking you those questions, because I was like stunned when I saw all the stuff that had happened to you. And I go, we got to talk about that, because it
yeah.
just goes to show what kind of a person he is and what was the most important thing in his life, his music.
and and it's a way of also saying to the universe, or however you want to put it, I want to honor those who invested in me.
Yeah.
I want, it's very rare that you get to actually really say thank you in the most meaningful way to those who may have seen something in you and tried to nurture it. But maybe the deepest way that you can say thank you is to say, I'm not going to stop, and I want to honor your investment in me.
I'm surprised other musicians who've gone through similar things haven't asked you about how you did that.
I
Because some musicians have some similar issues where they can't play, or they get hurt for some reason, and musicians like you who have gone through it can explain the things that you had to go through to figure out
well,
how to redo what you were doing.
here's the thing. I as a person, uh, I I I'm a nut for biographies and documentaries, and because oftentimes, especially in our Western culture, um, there's such a, there's this word success, and there's a certain idea of what of course that means. And it's not an of course. It's, to me, so a lot of those stories, like, you think about somebody, I don't care if it's a completely unrelated, like Winston Churchill, and you hear about the success, like this is what he accomplished, right? But to me, the fascinating thing is in the middle of getting to that, there was a time where he didn't believe in himself. He didn't know how he was going to get out of this one, etc. And what we know is the end result. But to me, the human story that is so important for us to keep honoring for the next person who's in the middle of it is to have an a conversation always out there from those who say, yes, I didn't believe in myself. I didn't know how I'd get out of it. Don't give up, to the next person who's in the middle of it. Like, that's like, don't wait till everything's rosy and you say, yeah, look at me. It's like, no. I want the next person who's out there, who's listening, who's in a challenging time, to understand that they're not alone, and that they have something valuable, whatever their endeavor is. Hold on to your hope, hold on to your love for whatever that is, whether you're an architect or a musician, and know that you have value, and hold on to your love for what that is, and hear it from those who would otherwise like to put out there that look at me, look at me, look at me. No. We've all had those times, and the
But you're not
human
like
story.
that. You're not like that.
Well, because I had good models.
Well, look at you got rejected the first time. The first letter was rejection.
Mm-hmm.
You pushed forward after that, and you ended up at Berkeley. You had two things that put you in disabilities, and you pushed through those two things. That says a lot about you.
Thank you.
And that was some of the stuff. I wasn't expecting to talk to you about all this stuff, but when I read through all of that, I'm going, this guy just keeps going. He never stops, and that's great.
Well, that's where the beautiful inspiration of human stories becomes without borders. You can take inspiration from others in any purview to stay on the path somehow to that. What do you believe in is what it comes back to. And to me, there's something, if it's authentic, there is something that is so important about trying to lift others up in whatever manner you're given in the world to try and do that, whether it's, organizing a charity, or whether it's playing music live, something that allows for that experience. We make our own community, and if that is what you believe in, then you must find a way to keep it alive.
Let's talk about the only recording that you have out called Live at Harvelle's.
All right.
Why decide to put a live album out and not studio work? What was the idea there? Why did you want to do that? Or was it because you're better a live act than you probably think you are as a studio person?
Well, there may be some of that, no doubt. I mean, at a certain, I think it's also like, look, let's be honest. I'm in a moment where I'm hoping and trying to be out there in the world in some fashion where people know what it is I do, so that for anyone that it's of value to knows I exist, and they can get something from it if they would. And so what's the most authentic presentation of what I do in the world? Well, I was always, my heroes were live players. And one of the things I admired the most was the courage of those players to make a mistake in reaching for something. It's not about being perfect. It's about being fully invested. And to me, that was always my North Star, was I wanted to reach for the Live at the Regal. It's like, what can that was my guiding light. I wanted to reach for that standard as a live player, where every night is not scripted. The solos are not going to be the same. The way I sing a lyric's not going to be the same. And so in trying to kind of introduce myself to the greater population, like, it felt like at this stage, a live album would be the most authentic way to present that. It's like, Well, warts and all, here's what you get when you come to hear me, and I'm hoping to come and play for you wherever you are. And there's no overdubs, there's no fixing stuff, no song was played twice. This is a night of me playing for you, and the feeling is going to be there like this. The reaching is going to be there like this. The singing is going to be there like this. And some songs may be a little tighter than others. Some solos might actually hit notes that others didn't. You know, this is real. And what I'm about is real.
It is what it is, basically.
It is what it is.
So how do people find out about you, John?
Well, my website, which is JONGEIGER.com, there's no H in John, JonGeiger.com, has links to all the other social media stuff, Instagram and whatnot, where you can like and follow. The album is available on all the services, Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, whatever you use. And there's a good deal of press and live performance videos on that website. That's an easy way. There's contact information if you want to book me. And Doug Deutsch is my publicist. He handles a lot of stuff. You can reach him as well. His contact is on my website. So the website's a good central clearinghouse. I do ask that if people do like what they hear, please share it. That's the strongest thing. I mean, I heard the music I love because somebody shared it with me in some form at some point in time. And in this social media age, it's more important than ever to, you know, go to a YouTube channel, like, follow, subscribe, go to an Instagram, like and follow, all that kind of stuff. And then put it out there on your social media so other people who might like it get turned on to it too. Because that's the modern day version of when I was reading a Guitar Player magazine and Clapton would say, oh, check out this Freddie King album. You know, it's like, that's the modern day version of that.
Yep.
And so, you know, if you like it, share it out.
People can get the disc live at Harvelle's on your website, correct?
They can get it on the website. They can get it on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, you know, all the stuff that's out there. You can, you know, you can pay for it or you can not pay for it. All I want, and I'm hoping for, is that people who would like it hear it and share it, and you know,
and let you know too that they like it.
That would be beautiful. That would be beautiful. I'm just a live player who loves traveling and playing, and that's all I want to do every night, is to have a chance to lift people up.
Well, if you come back to Massachusetts, we'll have to have you come in and play on my show.
It's not an if, it's a when. I would love to.
Yeah, we're gonna make that happen, I think.
I think that would be great. That'd be great.
So, John, I'm gonna let you go, but I want to say thank you. It's been fun. It's almost an hour we've been on. How do you like that?
I could go another 3.
Yeah, I know you could.
You know, I had I was doing something that I'll just throw this in because I love to mention this guy. I had a boxing coach while I was in Boston, and a dear guy. And I was boxing on the side until Berkeley found out about it, because they didn't like me hitting things with, you know, with hands that they had actually, you know. But his name is Sal Bartolo Jr. He's got a gym out in Winthrop. You should check it out. He's great. But he used to he used to say to me, you know, words of wisdom that I'll pass along. And it's about as Boston as you can get. And he used to say, Johnny, it's all mind over matter. You got no mind, it don't frickin' matter.
There you go.
So I'd love to come back east.
All right. Well, John, thank you very much for taking some time out of your busy day, and I look forward to seeing you here sometime.
I can't wait. And thank you so much for your interest and for what you do for the music. It's really appreciated.
I keep trying it. You know, it's easy. I love it. Just like you love to play, and I love to promote.
See, it's
all of
mind
this.
over matter.
It is.
You got no mind.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great.
Hang on a minute. Hang on.
All right.
That was Jon Geiger live right here on Blues Deluxe.